Man, it's a stark reality when you get to the point of your life when the days start to become years. Man, that is rough. And you never want to be the greatest man or woman that your kids never knew. Days become years and you thought things were one way when they really weren't, because you were so caught up in stuff that doesn't really mean anything at all. We're talking about parenting your adult children. Last week was part 1. Today is parenting your adult children, part 2. And if you guys remember, we were hanging out in Luke chapter 15 with a parable that we renamed, at least for these 2 weeks, the parable of the waiting or forgiving father, also known as parable of the prodigal son. But we realized and we came to see that there's just as much attention in that parable, if not more, given to the father than there is his son. And today we'll look a little further and find out there's also another interaction between him and his older son. But before we get there, I want you to turn in your Bibles, Luke chapter 15. Hopefully you've got your Bibles with you. Let me get there. Luke 15. Now I hope you got your word with you. If you don't, maybe you got it on your phone or whatever. But I want to encourage you each and every week, bring your Bible with you. It makes a difference. See, this is God's Word. We believe He wrote it. Because we believe He wrote it, we hang on every word that's in it. It is the light unto our path. And it is the objective standard by which we measure all truth against in our lives. And because we believe that, we believe it's the final authority for everything in our lives. And we don't want to just be hearers of the word. We want to be doers of it. And we believe that right here, every week, in these moments where we gather together, it has the power to bring life to our dead places. If you believe that, say, hey now, look out. Father, speak to us through your word today. You're a good God. We're not smart enough to figure this stuff out on our own. And when we do, we usually end up blowing it. So we look to you and we ask you to give us divine revelation into your word. Lord, may the words of my mouth and the meditations of my heart, oh God, be acceptable in your sight. For you are our rock and our redeemer. Now, if you remember last week, just to review, we were hanging out and we found out in Luke 15, and we found out 6 principles. I want to review those real quick. Throw up number 1. Number 1, we learned that what's old enough varies. Like, when's really old enough to, legal age is 18, but sometimes there's no real particular age when it's time for the kid to get out or stay. Sometimes it's beneficial for the kids to stay. Sometimes not. What's old enough varies. Number 2, adult kids will not always act the way you want them to act. They will let you down. They will hurt you. They may disappoint you. Don't take that personal. Don't ever stop loving them. Don't ever stop being a parent. Number 3, remember that one? Let them go. Or in some cases, if you need to, can anybody remember the other 3-word phrase? Get them gone. That's right. Or get on out of here. We'll add an extra word. Number 4, beware of unsolicited advice. Some of us need to hear that. Man, I'm telling you now. Number 5, do not enter into their dysfunction. You do not, listen, don't change your morals and your principles and your convictions just based off their lifestyle. Don't go running them down. Don't think you got to come to the rescue every time. And number 6, above all else, remember that grace always wins. Listen, if you weren't here last week, you're just coming into the middle of this thing, you can go listen to that message online. I encourage you to do so because these two are tied together. And we're going to give you 5 more because here we're picking up, and that's from his interaction with that younger son. But now there's this interaction that happens in this story with an older son. Now, if you guys remember, we're picking up in that Luke 15 says that the father said to his servants, this is at verse 22, "Quick, bring the best robe, put it on him, put a ring on his finger and sandals on his feet. Bring the fatted calf and kill it. Let's have a feast and celebrate, for this son of mine was dead and he's alive again. He was lost and is found." So they began to celebrate. That's what we pick up today. There's a party going on. There's a celebration going on, man. I'm telling you, it's going down. They are celebrating that life has been brought to dead places and this son has come home. But meanwhile, and many of you know, if you have multiple children, especially multiple adult children, there's always a meanwhile. You know what I'm talking about. Meanwhile, there's always many stories going on. Just when you think it's all figured out, meanwhile, don't forget, that could be a point right there. Meanwhile, the older son was in the field. When he came near the house, he heard music and dancing. So he called one of his servants and asked him, "What's going on?" And the servant said, "Your brother's come, and your father has killed the fatted calf because he has him back safe and sound." Can you believe it? But verse 28 says the older brother became angry and refused to go in. You know the irony of that verse right there? This is so typical with families. The son who was on the outside looking in is now on the inside. And the son who was on the inside looking out is now on the outside looking in. Pride will do that to you. A refusal to reconcile will do that to you. A refusal to extend to others the same grace that you have been given can do that to you. It can make you bitter. Put you in places you never thought you'd be. That's where we find this older son. The older brother became angry and refused to go in. So his father went out and pleaded with him. Notice, the father went out to him and pleaded with him. First point I want to make to you that you need to know as an adult, parent of an adult child. Number 1, always be consistent. And don't ever be too proud to make the first move. I want you to notice what's happening in this passage with the father. Now notice you got two sons, 2 totally different situations, but same consistent response by the father. Notice, first son, man, he goes out, he squanders everything, he ruins it, he blows his father off. Doesn't care whether he's living or dead, just give me mine. That son repents, he comes to the end of himself and he realizes, what have I done? So he comes home. And in the Jewish tradition in that time, if you remember last week, we said this, just as he's coming onto the property, traditionally what would happen is the father would wait for that son to come crawling to him. He comes to him, pop, slaps him with the back of his hand, a sign of disrespect for what you've done, then takes a clay pot and drops it before him in front of all the other family to signify the bond has been broken. You can come back, but you're going to be a slave now because of what you've done. We are done. But that's not what he got. The Bible tells us in Luke 15 that while he was still a long way off, the father ran to him. Men in the Jewish culture over 40 do not run, but this father runs to him, showing the fullness of grace and mercy when that son was truly repentant and coming home. He got totally what he didn't expect. That's what grace always does. That's why grace always wins. And he runs to the son. Now notice, you remember the story. Don't enter their dysfunction. He never goes after him, never goes into his world, never feels like he's got to come to the rescue. He maintains his morals, maintains his principles and his convictions. He does not change his behavior as so many parents do today based off of his children's behavior. He maintains his theology, maintains his conviction, but when that son comes on that property, he goes to him. He makes the first move. He's not too proud. So that's the problem today. Many parents, okay, well, he's going to have to call me. She's going to have to do. That's right. After what they've done, they're going to. Don't be too proud to make the first move. Notice what the father does. Now the oldest son is angry, and he's refusing to engage in the party. Like so many of us do every Sunday in worship. You refuse to engage in the party. You might show up, but you ain't going to engage. So his father went out and pleaded. Notice, the father went out. Just as he went to this youngest son, now the father has gone out. He is consistent. And he's going to him. Now notice when he goes out, he does not compromise his conviction or his principles or his theology. He doesn't go to the oldest son and go, oh, I'm so sorry. You know what? I'm sorry I offended you. We'll shut the party down. We'll just shut the party down for the youngest son right now. Well, I'm so sorry. He doesn't do that. He says, no. You got to come party with us. There's a party going on. I'm not shutting it down. We want you to come in and be part of it. He doesn't go to the oldest son and go, oh, I'm so sorry. You're right. Here's all your inheritance too. Here's all your, let me pay you off too. Here. He doesn't do that. He stands firm in his principles and his convictions, but he's not too proud to make the first move either. The reason he can make the first move is because he's secure in his principles and his foundation. Listen, Bill, never me too. Bill got on me today because I said listen too much. Never be, don't start counting. You'll miss what God has for you today. I prayed that for Bill before the service. Never be too proud to make the first move. And you don't, just because you do, doesn't mean you're compromising your principle. Maintain that. But don't be too proud to make the first move. So his father went out and pleaded with him. But he answered his father, look, all these years I've been slaving for you. And I never disobeyed your orders. Yet you never even gave me a young goat so I could celebrate with my friends. You never threw me a party. But when this son of yours, who has squandered your property with prostitutes, comes home, you kill the fatted calf for him. In other words, he got his, where's mine? What's up, Dad? And then he comes home and you throw a party for him? What about me? If you got your Bibles open, underline, highlight the word property. That's the primary focus of that boy. And I want to use that to platform into the second point, which is this. Never, ever let money or possessions get in between your relationship with your family. How many times have we seen this? Now notice the oldest son, he doesn't say, now you can imagine that the father was totally heartbroken. He was ruined over the fact that his son would come to him and say, Dad, I don't care whether you live or die, I just want what's mine. That broke his heart. He was heartbroken. And the oldest son doesn't come up to him and say, Father, man, I'm concerned for your heart. I know that must have hurt. He wants to talk about property. I want to talk about stuff. I want to talk about money. That's the issue here. The father is not concerned about property, stuff. He's concerned about that boy's heart. He's concerned about that boy's soul. Money was never an issue. Property was never an issue. Inheritance was never an issue. Until the kid ruined it and came back home and got a party. And now all of a sudden the older son is not concerned about souls and hearts. He's concerned about property. In other words, he got his, and now you're throwing a party for him. How's that going to affect mine? How many times have you sat down at the inheritance table and go, wait a minute, hold up. Now that doesn't seem fair to me. What about mine? Father, you gave all the inheritance to him. Is that going to affect mine? And now are you going to re-give him more? That means we may not get as much, and now he's getting a part. What about me? Boy, listen, if you want to really find out about the character of an individual, sit down at the table and talk money. You will find out real quick. I don't care how much they come to church, how much they serve, what they do. Sit down at the table and talk money, and you'll find out real quick. Sit down and talk about inheritance. Some of you, your parents are worth more dead to you than alive. You're just waiting. Don't live your life that way. Live your life as though you get nothing. Because in the end, all that stuff means nothing. That's why Jesus said in Matthew 6:19 through 21, do not store up for yourselves treasures on earth, but store up treasures in heaven. Don't focus on all this stuff. I made a post yesterday about this yard sale theology, man. It's yard sale season. It blows my mind. We will have yard sales and all but give away the things that we spent tons of money for that at one point in time we could not do without, which seemed to have so much value. And yet every spring and fall, we go and try to load that stuff off on somebody else. What does that say about us? And it's not that yard sales are wrong or anything like that. I mean, they're great. You get good stuff. I'm not saying that yard sales are wrong. And certainly, churches even have yard sales for missions. But if you combine the biblical narrative with what Jesus was saying with Malachi chapter 3, when God said, hey, here's a principle, here's a guideline for you. Y'all bring the whole tithe in the storehouse. Bring that 10%. If you do that, I'll give you so much, you won't have enough. You'll have so much that you'll be able to fund missions, and then you'll have yard sales just to give stuff away. Imagine that. But we want to talk about property, stuff. Future you will always tell present you. If you could have a conversation with future you would tell you all that stuff means zero compared to the stuff you could give away and change lives and store up treasure in eternity for. If you could talk to future you would tell you it's a whole lot better to have money in your savings account than to have all the stuff you want. Your multiple cars and homes and all the things that you find value in. And there's nothing wrong with having stuff. I'm not saying that. But when it becomes the focus, never let that stuff. How many family relationships have been severed by stuff? Money. My mom grew up on a farm. There were 8 brothers and sisters. And if any of you have heard me tell her story, He grew up on her farm. Her father was a self-made millionaire through farming. If he taught them anything, he taught them how to work, which my mom taught me at a young age. And it was not always, when their life experience was difficult because he was a hard man. He did not show them the affection and the love that they desired, and he beat the mess out of their mom. He physically and verbally and emotionally abused her, ran around on her, and their life was difficult. But my mom growing up on the farm was the one of 8 that had artistic ability and went off to college, Furman University. She had an opportunity in my granddad's eyes to get out off the farm, out of that life. She played the piano. Her freshman year, she got pregnant and would later give birth to the girl who is now my older sister. She took responsibility for what she did, got married, and began to raise that little girl and another boy who's standing before you now. She married my dad and owned up to the mistake she made. But she never followed the path that my granddad wanted her to follow because she made that mistake. And when I say mistake, I'm not saying my sister was a mistake, but the decision she made was not God's decision for her. And then my grandfather was like her dad. So many years later, he held that against her all her life, but she never knew it. So many years later, when he died, he's a millionaire. There's plenty of stuff to go around. It's time for the inheritance to be spread. And the older sisters are there, and they come to find out he cut her completely out of the will. Everything. Everybody else, she gets 0. At the time, they didn't. She later would find out in life, and that's a wound she still carries. You know, last week I talked about how she's great at unsolicited advice. Part of the reason for that is because of that wound right there. See, we all have wounds that cause us to do stuff. But all the brothers and sisters got together and pooled their inheritance and split it up even and gave her a fraction, which is the same fraction they had, so she would not think she was cut out of the will, so it would not destroy her. And they never told her until many, many years later. The reason they did that is because relationship, family, was more important than stuff. Never, ever let stuff get in the way of your relationships. Because in the end, it is just stuff. But when this son of yours who has squandered your property with prostitutes comes home, you kill the fatted calf for him. Verse 31. My son, the father said, you are always with me, and everything I have is yours. Underline the word always. Number 3. Never delete the word always from your vocabulary. Always keep the door open. Always think the best about them, even when they're not acting the best. Always love them. Never give up on them. Never stop letting them know they matter. Always. Always. Don't you ever give up on them, no matter how far they go. My son, the father said, you are always with me. Everything I have, I'm always with you. My resources are always yours. I'll never give up on you. Verse 32, but we had to celebrate and be glad because this brother of yours was dead and is alive again. He was lost and he was found. underline the phrase, we had to celebrate and be glad. We just had to. Number 4, never stop celebrating them. Ever. My mom and dad still send us cards on Valentine's Day and Thanksgiving and Christmas and birthdays and July just whatever. And sometimes there's even money in them. They still throw us parties. And Santa Claus still comes to the house where I grew up. They never stopped celebrating us. One thing early on my wife did that just was a source of some contention was she throws these enormous birthday parties for our kids. Now the source of contention is twofold. First, financially, because we could do the same thing for a lot cheaper. But number 2, because usually what party means is Mark does all the work while I decorate and serve the cake. Like, whoever said whatever is full of it because you ain't there. It's truth. She would verify it. She does work too. But here's the thing about that. I love it because she makes much of them. She makes a big deal. And I'll never, look, doing things more economically sound, yeah. But the part about making a big deal out of them, never stop. The moment they leave your fold, whenever that moment is, they move out. Trust me, the world will do enough to make them feel like trash. You don't have to add to it. Always celebrate them. Always make them feel loved and valued. Never stop celebrating their stuff. Even when they're adults and they're playing church intramurals. Make as big deal out of that as you did when they were playing t-ball. Never stop celebrating them. Here's a testimony from Brother Bill about how he made that choice with his own son.
I'm not sure there are sweeter words that a parent can hear than their kid tell them, I love you. My wife and I made an agreement early on that we were going to live proactively and not reactively with our kids. Now, we weren't always perfect with that, but one of the areas we were going to do that in was in these 3 words, I love you. So we made a commitment. We're always going to tell our kids that we love them. Because as incredible as it is to hear your kids say, I love you, inversely, it's just as painful when they don't tell you. That commitment was kind of put to the test in the high school years. Well, with both my kids, but especially with my son. I love you, son. All right. That'd be the response. Okay. Wow. All right. I love you, buddy. All right. I don't know if it was that he just was becoming a man and finding his way or what it was. We had a good relationship. We weren't struggling. That's what he was doing. And it really hit when we took him to college. Freshman year, University of South Carolina, Columbia. We go for the weekend. We're going to be getting him settled, dropping him off. We're looking at this weekend. We want to be as tight and as close as possible. And it seems like he just wants to be as far away from us as possible. I remember one time walking across the campus and he went off 15, 20 paces ahead of us. Don't get me wrong. We knew we were raising an adult. We knew we were raising someone who would be on their own. And so we were grateful. I was grateful he wasn't crying, don't leave me. Good grief. But it still hurt. And that last night of the weekend, we're getting ready to leave to go back home to Virginia. And so we're saying our goodbyes again, very, very hard. And I say, I love you, buddy. And he says, okay, Bill. I reach out and I embrace him and I hold him tight. I mean, I'm getting ready to leave, man. And he stands there stiff. Just stiff. Doesn't hug me back. That hurt. It hurt. We'd visit him or we'd see him. I'd give him a hug. He didn't really hug me back, but I kept hugging him. I'm going to live a proactive life. I'm not going to be dependent upon my kid expressing love back to me. I'm going to do what I know I'm supposed to do. I'm going to let him see what I want him to see. And that is, no matter what you do, no matter where you go, where you are, my love for you will never end. Well, he's in his third year now. Somewhere around last year, somewhere in that second year, away from us, same old thing I told him. I love you, buddy, like I always do. But this time, he said, love you too. I was like, what? Really? And the next time I saw him, I gave him a hug. And he actually hugged me. Probably not as hard as I hugged him, but he actually got the arms involved. We're still not where I would love for us to be honest with you. But maybe my expectations are a little much. Maybe I still want my little buddy who was my sidekick and we did all this stuff together and I was his rock. But whatever this is going to be, we've made a turn. Even if we went the rest of our lives and he never gave it back to me. I'm not stopping. I'll never stop. I'll never stop loving him. And I'll never stop telling him. And I'll never stop embracing him. I'll never stop.
Never stop celebrating them. There's a key phrase that Bill makes in that video that will turn us to our final point today. He says something to the effect of, we're not yet really where I'd like for us to be. There's a lot of people in here who can relate to that statement when it comes to your parent-child relationships, probably your spousal relationship, and just about any other relationship in your family. Notice verse 32. But we had to celebrate and be glad, because this brother of yours was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found. And then there is a period. You can highlight that period if you want, because it's important. A period in the Bible? A period. Notice there's a period and then there's the next chapter, and Jesus changed the subjects. He leaves that story suspended. There's never, we don't get, so the older brother hugged his father, said he was sorry, and went back inside. You don't get that. We don't know what happened. You don't get, so the older brother went in and told his younger brother, man, I love you. I'm glad you're back. Praise be to God. We don't get that. We don't know what happens. We are left to wonder. Were they reconciled? Did the older brother get his stuff and said, I'm out of here? Did the younger brother go back out on another binge? What happened? We don't know. Number 5, you may not always get a conclusion or a resolution. You may not always get the period you want. You might get a ... You may go to your deathbed without a conclusion, without a resolution. Some of you are sitting here today, your parents are gone, and you never got a conclusion, a resolution. That's hard. If you are here today and your child is still alive, your parent is still alive, you have a glorious window, opportunity that some of the people sitting beside you either never got or never took advantage of. What are you going to do with it? Some of you are in the place of things are not where I'd like them to be. God is big enough to move today. You cannot, and for those of you who you never will get that resolution because it's done. You cannot get that day back. But you can start a new day because God makes all things new. You cannot unsow what you've already reaped. There are consequences for our sin. But you can sow something new. You can sow something new today because God is able to make all things new. Some of you need to make a move today. Make a phone call. Write a card. And just in case you're sitting there thinking, today's message has nothing to do with you, I want to close by just stepping outside the framework of parenting your adult child and leave you with one last phrase from this passage. Quick, bring the best robe, put it on him. Put a ring on his finger and sandals on his feet. Many of you have been in the shoes of the prodigal, and you find it difficult to put on the sandals, put on the robe because of what you've done. And you say, I'm not worthy. You're right, you're not. Get over it. That's what grace does. Put on the sandals. Put on the robe. Stop groveling around and celebrate. God gets no pleasure out of you continuing to pay penance for stuff Jesus has already paid for. And that grace right there is the motivation for you to start something new today.